Welcome back, guys. And we're back again with another lore breakdown. And I've got quite a bit to discuss, and by the good blood, is there a lot. After working your way from the lantern into the big ominous building, making decent work of the sideways faced werewolves, as soon as you've dealt with them, if you pay close enough attention, you can see these eyeballs on the wall outlined in cobweb. With the Mind Frayer enemy in the previous zone, I could only wonder. With the correlating spider themes and cults, was this a product of what Amygdala's insanity created? Just through the archway of another door is a huge spider, and a bunch of little spiders surrounding it, hanging from a web. And to my surprise, this was the first anatomically realistic spider, but still it was just as creepy as Amygdala. What or who are these spiders, I wondered. Speaking of eyeballs, the ones in the entrance hall are everywhere in this grand hall. All I could think of was insanity and spiders, and how they're always watching, waiting. Just like the spider dropped once I entered its domain. What could be the story behind them, possibly? Maybe this gigantic beast was once a human and turned into a beast. Thinking back to lest we all become beasts. As I led the spiders through the halls onto the bridge just past the stairs, I noticed a hunter standing just across the way. One interesting thing about this bridge is the fog below. Unlike the fog next to Amygdala's lair, how we could see flags implying we were just above the tallest buildings, the fog below this bridge is nothing but blank, dreary, and thick. I believe this implies the location. This zone is at an even higher point than the Nightmare Frontier. Like in the Nightmare Frontier, I'm slowly crawling an unseen mountain. If you really take these games in by piece, you really get something wonderful out of it. Don't you agree? I don't know about you guys, but shit, I love this series. But seriously, why was a hunter here? It had me think, guys. Back to the very first cutscene. We were born by the blood and undone by it. And there's a stat in the menu called Beasthood, which still perplexes me. For one, how is it triggered? And seeing this hunter standing made me really think. If we're all byproducts of the same blood, could we have derived or been created from Amygdala? After knocking the hunter's socks off, right when I walked in, I noticed baby spiders being stabbed into the ground. A blade or a spike piercing through them. Almost reminded me of the baby I killed. Had been told to kill. And led to kill. For the sake of the true ending. Almost like it was visually putting the thought of killing a newborn without even realizing it till the deed had already been done. Something akin to insanity. And of course, more eyes, all over the walls. Every second I looked at them, I heard Willem's voice play in my head. We are still yet to see. Like these eyes saw for us or helped us see. Making me think of the Mind Frayer. There's something there, just with those two things connecting. In Willem's mask in the cutscene, when you see him right before Rom, it is in the fashion of covering his eyes and exposing his mouth, as Willem didn't need to see because he was seeing stuff in his mind. Like he was being controlled. It reminded me of the one and only, the great Cthulhu. And then, down the stairs, there are these enemies, guys. See, in every Souls game, there's like a shadow dwarf or something or another. In this, it looked like dwarves who were husks and had tall cages thrown onto their heads. They did nothing but groan and moan. It was quite unsettling. And right before the boss, there are these mummy enemies with cleavers and chains that reminded me exactly of the giants that were super early in the game. But like what they were before the Mensis ritual. Going up an elevator and coming out of the balcony of this terrible place in the Mensis nightmare, there are now homunculus enemies. Dog heads put onto birds' bodies. Bird heads put onto dog bodies. They were ferociously creepy. I thought about the eyes, and it seemed to be leading closer and closer to utter insanity. Whoever responsible was having delusional thoughts about spiders, eyes, and I think back to an item description from Bergenworth, mentioning this eldritch truth. Did this great being speak to the boss lying in wait here? I couldn't wait to find out, so I scuttled along. There were these interesting husk enemies that animated themselves as I walked by them, as if some great force was controlling them. And a few steps later, I finally found the boss of the Mensis nightmare, spouting nonsense about the cosm, which, guys, that's an old word for the cosmos, space, asking if it heard their prayers, space itself, saying, "No, we shall not abandon the dream," as if some voice was talking to him. Donning the same creepy cage that the dwarf enemies had. Was he the one performing all these grotesque experiments? Creating creatures with different creatures? To create some perfect beast? Maniacally smiling and laughing, saying no one can catch us. No one can stop us now. As if he's in some perpetual state of a delusional grandeur and mania. Was this Mycolash, the host of the nightmare, simply a vessel of the old one, being used and controlled by it? I couldn't avoid the thought that the nightmare is nothing more than to turn everyone into vile beasts, lest we all become beasts. Fighting him, it was heavily implied he was nothing more than a vessel for this nightmare. After damaging him, he claims the nightmare swirls and churns and it's unending. To me, all that meant that it was already too late to undo, because it was apparent everyone in Yharnam had turned, especially by the blood moon. That I, the one who craves souls, triggered. Halfway through the fight, he repeats his first line, but he changes a few lines. "Do you hear our prayers? Once you did for the vacuous Rom." And suddenly, it all made sense to me. The reason Willem's mind was so vacant, the reason he uttered nonsense, he'd been blessed by the Eldritch truth. The vacuous Rom is Master Willem. Once he brought back the blood, he became and reached full beasthood, and he turned into Rom, while his body was nothing more than a vacuous husk. Mycolash pleads, "Grant us eyes, grant us eyes." All I could think of were Rom's beady eyes that sent a chill down your spine and found a way into the crevices of your soul. He rants on, "Plant eyes on our brain to cleanse our beastly idiocy. The grand lake of mud now hidden from sight. The cosmos, of course. Let us sit about and speak feverishly in the wee hours of new ideas of a higher plane." It brought me back how Willem said we were yet to see. As if he meant to say, we were yet to see because you have not had eyes planted on your brain from the Great One. As if our ways of life are plain and simple, and this Great One's idea of turning us all into monsters, his dream of nightmares, must be a reality. It's like everything Mycolash was saying is exactly describing Willem, further implying they were all controlled by the same being, that Willem awoke something of great evil. And honestly, guys, that sounds like the last King's Field game, and awoke a terrible beast of darkness. In Mycolash's death, he wails like a siren, or a soul finally going to rest, or being released from a terrible evil. And he says, "Now I'm waking up. I'll forget everything." As if he's waking up from the nightmare, or even what we did in the very beginning of the game. Woke up, and we forgot everything and anything that happened, completely clueless. You pick up his helmet, and guys, it's called the Mensis cage, as if it was a prison of thought. Perhaps Mycolash was nothing more than a host, a tortured human driven to his sanity from the Eldritch truth. Perhaps someone as simple as one of the scholars from Bergenworth, thinking back to his insane ramblings, asking if the Kamos hears his prayers like they heard Rom's. As if he wants to reach full beasthood but is damned to isolation, I believe. This is his mind we are in, and the Great One is using him as a host to broadcast its thoughts into him, to make his dream a reality, making him incessantly live and relive all the things he's hearing and seeing. Only in death do we see the true Mycolash, as if the mania and insane ramblings were literally all of the Great One's doing, making him go in circles in his own insanity to keep him from knowing anything but what the Great One wants him to think, or allows him to think. After a cutscene plays, a brain drops, and it's none other than the thing that was pummeling you with frenzy earlier. And I believe it's what Michael Ash was worshipping. Also, something that the Old One or the Great One left for him, created for him, or made him think and made him create it himself. Could it have been something the Old One left for Michael Ash, something he created? Or was it something that the Old One made Michael Ash think of to create in this nightmare? Part of me believes that the brain was the boss itself, a creation of the Great One. The next area is the last area of the Nightmare Frontier, and they just keep flawlessly expanding the story about the Scourge of the Beast, the Old One, the Great One. Once they awakened the Old One, they were corrupted to insanity, and did nothing but carry out the Old One's wishes and desires with the Mensis ritual and nightmare. Just like once the Old One was awakened by King Allant, and surely enough, demons took the place of his 4 best men, and quickly everyone fell to the darkness and the madness that swept Boletary's lands. God, I'm sorry guys, but I just gotta say this. I love this series, and I am loving this game. Like always, tell me what you guys thought, what you liked, what you didn't like. Share your theories. Don't forget to subscribe to see Bruce and I every weekend. Thanks for coming by for another lore breakdown of Bloodborne. Until next time, friends.
Some say coffin.